All right, so as Pittsburgh maintains a 1-0 lead over Vancouver with 4.5 minutes left, again, it's Vancouver's putting up a good effort. All the effort is there. They're just not in a spot to make that comeback. There's some interesting stuff that's going on. Calgary, right now, they're second in their division with that ninth win in a row tonight, and Edmonton drops to the first wild card spot. They would now play San Jose in the first round. Minnesota and St. Louis are still having a date. Chicago and Nashville look like they're having a date as well. The Kings are falling out of contention. They're 5 points back. Uh, Even if they win now, I have a funny feeling that St. Louis now is realizing themselves finally. St. Louis really should be in the playoffs. Interesting thing going on in the East. The Ottawa Senators win again. They take first place. Here's the thing. They go from a date with Boston, a team that I think they match up really well with, and they get the Rangers instead, if that's the way it turns out. And I don't know that I like their matchup with the Rangers. Now, this is fun, isn't it? Oh, how much would Habs fans love to see this matchup, and how would I, as a Bruins fan, feel about this matchup? Montreal, Boston. Montreal, Boston. Again, I feel like this matchup is magic, and this is why I love the divisional playoff setup that they now have in the NHL. The Toronto Maple Leafs leapfrog the Islanders. Now, as long as you ignore the fact that Tampa is on their way up, as long as you ignore that, Toronto looks full value right now. A gutsy win tonight against Carolina, big win. And Pittsburgh, if they win, they get home ice in Columbus. I believe Columbus gets home ice, and it doesn't matter. These two teams, it's going to be big. I've been asked about the the best playoff matchups for me as a fan. What matchups I'd like to see the most. Well, if I was making the matchups, at some point Calgary plays Edmonton. At some point that happens. So, Calgary and Edmonton, Battle of Alberta. I want to see Minnesota and Chicago at some point. I would love to see Montreal and Boston. I'd love to see Montreal and Toronto. I'd love to see Montreal and Ottawa, Ottawa and Toronto. Any of those matchups appeal to me quite a bit. Washington, in order to get past their past, Washington has to slay Pittsburgh. They have to. The Rangers would be a nice feather in their cap as well. Reminds me of the year Dallas won the Stanley Cup in '99. And the first thing that I had said to me wasn't Hull's skate was in the crease. It was, you're lucky you didn't play the Wings. And they're right. Dallas won the Stanley Cup that year, and they didn't play the Red Wings in the playoffs. Because every time they played the Wings, they lost. If somehow Columbus knocks out Pittsburgh and Washington beats Toronto, Washington knocks out Columbus, and then let's say Ottawa wins their division and it's Washington beats Ottawa, all you're going to hear about from non-Washington fans is, well, you didn't have to beat the Rangers and you didn't have to beat the Penguins. You're lucky. Because that's what fans will do. They'll say, well, this matchup would have been bad for Washington. This one would have been bad for Washington. So they're lucky. There's no consideration given to the fact that the teams that knock those teams out are good. And I say this as a Canuck fan as well. I know in '94, the Canucks went through Calgary, they went through Dallas, they went through Toronto, and there was talk then about how, well, at least they didn't have to play Edmonton because they wouldn't have matched up well with Edmonton. It happens all the time. So right now, in terms of momentum, you have to give Calgary huge momentum right now in their division. Let me move this over so you can see that division. In terms of momentum, again, Minnesota's got some back, but man, St. Louis is playing some really good hockey right now. Oh, I did too. Now, in the Atlantic Division, in terms of momentum, it's all Ottawa. And if you're looking in the Northeast Division, or Metro Division, I'm used to Northeast Division. This is Northeast here. This is, well, Atlantic, and this is Metro. Uh, Momentum, it's hard. I think Pittsburgh has momentum right now. So final four based on momentum right now, that's your final four. Pittsburgh, Ottawa, St. Louis, and Calgary. And fans go insane because I picked two Canadian teams based on momentum. But oh no, it doesn't turn out like that. Which ones based on experience would be most likely? San Jose, Chicago, Rangers, and Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh's the only one that repeats in that situation. In terms of my preseason predictions and who I thought was the best team coming in, you'd have San Jose, you'd have Chicago, Montreal, and Washington. So it's still kind of a mess. And this is a league right now that doesn't have just one Stanley Cup favorite, that doesn't just have one team that looks ready. And there's been times in the NHL where that's happened. I know in 91, 92, and even 93, the Penguins were the best team in the league. 93, they managed to choke it away. I believe it was Kevin Stevens who said before Game 7 against the New York Islanders, it's a Game 7, and the best teams always win a Game 7, and we're the best team. And the Islanders beat them. So it just goes to show that even if you've won a Stanley Cup, don't get cocky, because you're playing against professionals. And I think the Kings, in picking up Iginla and picking up Bishop, I think there was an assumption there that was going to make them contenders. And there was an assumption by this commentator that it made the Kings better. And based on current returns, it looks like the Kings greatly underestimated the Blues, as did I. I'm not sure how without Shattenkirk they've got better, but they've got better. I know you could look and say, well, they've beaten these teams. You could point out teams that have been below them in the standings they've beaten. They weren't beating those teams before the deadline. They were losing games they were supposed to win before the deadline. It seems like pride has taken over. And there may be a part two. I feel this when I watch Vancouver games, win or lose, is, well, we've sold. So your GM goes out and he sells at the deadline. And it's like the guys who are left in the locker room go, you know, our pride's on the line here. Nobody's expecting us to do anything. We're being treated like we're out and we're not eliminated yet. So for St. Louis, they might have looked at Shattenkirk going and gone, "Wow, Doug Armstrong doesn't have any faith in us. Doesn't believe we can make this comeback, that we can be a Stanley Cup contender." Screw him. Screw the rest of the fans that are writing us off. Screw the pundits and the writers and guys like myself who are saying we just don't have the courage, and just go out there and prove them wrong. And that's what the Blues have done since the deadline. Now, can they choke it away? I guess. Sure. I know, and this is something I've noticed too. Oilers fans are starting to get nervous. Oilers fans are starting to ask me questions about could the Oilers fall out of the playoffs? They could, but I can't see why that would happen. Because for the Oilers to fall out of the playoffs, one of the teams that are behind them has to get it together. The Kings are currently sitting with 70 points. They have 66 games under their belt. The Oilers have 67 games under their belt and they have 79 points. So you have
Penguins scored again.
So it's 3-0.
3-0.
Yeah, I think it's two empty netters.
Yeah.
But for the Kings, it's a 9-point difference that they'd have to make up on Edmonton. All Edmonton needs to do in order to beat them and hold them off, I would think, is out of their last 15 games, if they win 5. If they win 5, that's 89 points. That forces the Kings to win 10 of their last 16. And I don't know that they can do that. They haven't shown an ability to do that. Not to this point. They haven't got any better since Bishop got there or since Iginla got there. If anything, they're falling further back because these guys are playing better. It's not... What's happened tonight is not an issue of Edmonton playing poorly. It is an issue of Calgary being fantastic. The Calgary team that blitzed the Islanders the other night was flat out scary because Thomas Greiss stood on his head for the Islanders. Notice they're nowhere on this board right now. And that game against Calgary is why the Islanders aren't on this board. If the Islanders beat Calgary, they're still ahead of the Leafs by a point. because the Islanders have been unable to square that away. The Maple Leafs right now sit in the playoffs. The Maple Leafs are, as of right now, in a playoff spot. And the Capitals and the Maple Leafs, you couldn't keep me away from that series. I could not turn away from that series. There's no way. There's no way. And I don't even know if Boston and Montreal are playing on another channel if I'm turning away from a series between Toronto and Washington, because you've got a team in Washington that is fascinating for having choked away so many playoffs. So many times where they've been a top team and they've lost to teams that they should beat. On paper, they should beat. And they managed to find a way to lose. Toronto is a classic underdog. They're a young team. They're a fast team. They're a very skilled team, and they have offense that can beat you. You look at these series, okay, and on at first look, this San Jose should win, and Calgary has the momentum. They should win that. And this is just based on where things are right now. Minnesota, I can't see them losing to St. Louis, although St. Louis beat them the other night. And I can't see Nashville beating Chicago, although Nashville has beaten Chicago before in regular season meetings. And Chicago lost in the first round to St. Louis last year, so they are capable of losing in the first round. Now, in the East, I know Ottawa's on a huge run, but I see the Rangers as a better team. Montreal, Boston, you know what? I'll take Boston just because I want to make fans angry. No, I genuinely love the games Boston's playing this year. Today's game that I streamed my reaction in the first two, Boston never fell out of their game, even though Philadelphia controlled a lot of the play. Boston played their game right to the end. They scored with 5 seconds left, and it was tremendous. I freaked out. I cheered, and Yvonne will attest to that. I cheered and danced around a little bit. Zombie Nation makes me happy. And I genuinely think going into the playoffs that as long as Boston's momentum stays where it is, I honestly think they can take Montreal out. I think Boston has enough scoring to overcome whatever Montreal tries to throw at them. But I digress. I can't see Washington losing. I can't see Pittsburgh losing. So I'm taking two upsets, both in the Atlantic Division. So that leaves Calgary and San Jose. Between the two, I can't not take Calgary. I can't. Oh, again, I've made it so that division doesn't show up. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be against the Pacific Division. So now you've got Minnesota and Chicago. Pick them. Pick them. Right now, I say Chicago. Right now, I would say Calgary and Chicago in the semifinal. But I could make an argument for Anaheim. I could make an argument for San Jose, and I could make an argument for Edmonton easily. Rangers and Boston. I pick the Rangers. I think the Rangers are a better team than the Bruins. I think Lundqvist is a better goalie as long as he's back in time. I think Lundqvist is a better goalie than Rask. And I know Lundqvist is listed as 2 to 3 weeks. You know what? Carey Price was day-to-day for months. At this time of the year, if a goalie's really hurt, you're not going to hear about it. They're not going to admit Lundqvist is really hurt. I know Ronta's a really good goaltender, but Ronta doesn't have the name value. He doesn't have the fear value that you're going to find with Lundqvist. Between Washington and Pittsburgh, right now Pittsburgh shuts out Vancouver tonight, and they handled them, but the Canucks are a shell of what they were even a month ago. But still, I think Washington is the better team of the two. So you have Washington and the Rangers. All right, so Calgary and Chicago, I would say Chicago. And between the Rangers and Washington, there you go. If I was wagering right now in the Stanley Cup final, I would say you have Chicago, you have Washington, and Chicago wins the cup. This changes every night. The way that things look. I mean, Calgary a month ago was dead in the NHL. Their run was nowhere to be found. Their goaltending was nowhere to be found a month ago. Chicago was considered to be miles behind Minnesota. I remember Chicago playing Minnesota. Chicago was 7 points back of Minnesota, and I said Chicago is not falling 9 points back of Minnesota. They'll win. Wild fans came in and told me I was wrong. Chicago won that game, and they won it 5-2. Because Chicago will not fall back of Minnesota. They will not fall that far back. their pride, and just their overall talent and their experience will not allow it. In this division, I'm scared of Montreal. I am genuinely scared of Montreal because Carey Price has never won a Stanley Cup. And a goaltender as talented as Carey Price without a Stanley Cup is extremely dangerous because usually those goalies win a Stanley Cup. At least one. And in this division, Pittsburgh is still the defending Stanley Cup champions, and until proven otherwise, they're the best team in the league. And no, the regular season doesn't prove it, because if it did, then President's Trophy winners would win a lot more Stanley Cups than they do. Winning the President's Trophy is not a win. One other thing I wanted to touch on, I've had people ask me about Aaron Ekblad. I was going to do an Ekblad video tonight, but I thought about it, and because the hit that took him out wasn't really dirty, and because he hasn't missed a lot of games with concussions, it is the third concussion he suffered in a year. That is problematic. He's 21 years old, but I'm going to wait and see what their prognosis is. If they say day-to-day with concussion symptoms, I'm not going to say a whole lot. If he misses some games, so I'm talking not just 1 or 2, I'm talking like 5 or more, then we will visit a discussion on Aaron Ekblad and where the Florida Panthers are going. Because if Aaron Ekblad is hurt, and if his talent is diminished by concussions, and he's going to be on that list of players who could have been great, but concussions knocked him out early, that's a discussion I'll have then. But I'm waiting on it. So people were saying, well, what about Ekblad? Look, I got my Panthers hat, I got my Panthers jersey, I was all ready to go on it. And I had started, and I looked at his track record, I looked at how many games he's missed, and I thought, you know what, I can't right now do a video because he hasn't missed enough games for me to be able to sit here and say, oh, his career is going to be over, because then I'm being sensationalistic. I can't make any statements because he hasn't suffered a massive concussion. All concussions are important. There's no such thing as an unimportant concussion. But he has never suffered a concussion that's taken him out of hockey for an extended period of time. This could be that concussion. This could absolutely be that concussion. And when I looked on YouTube and I saw the hits that have taken him out, including the one from this past World Cup, they're disturbing. They're disturbing because they're hits that happen in every game. And Ekblad has been unlucky to have 3 of them happen to him, and he's only 21. It's the kind of game he plays. It's the high-risk game, and the high-risk game sometimes leads to the high-risk injuries that take place. So there's that. But it is in the pipeline, and if he ends up missing, I'm going to say 5 games. I'm going to have to sit and have a chat about it with you guys, because if Ekblad's out, the entire Florida organization's got a problem, because he is a number 1 defenseman, and you cannot exist in this league without a number 1 defenseman. So anyways, let me know in the comments what you guys think. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. It's a popular thing to do these days. And tell me who out of these teams you think will emerge. Who out of these teams on this board that are currently in the playoffs will emerge? And if Tampa, another question for you guys, if Tampa takes that final spot from Toronto, and Tampa's just rolling right now, if Tampa takes that final spot, do they knock out the Capitals? Do the Tampa Bay Lightning roll in and knock out the Capitals? Because every fiber of my being says yes. Absolutely. And I don't like that answer, because my foolish pride says, you picked the Capitals at the start of the year, you're going to ride them out. You got to, hopefully this is the year they do it. But Tampa scares the hell out of me. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to y'all again soon.